Sweet. What's up, guys? My name is Danny or Daniel. I draw cars and turn them into 3D prints using HueForge. Is this the first time that you've seen HueForge? Can I get a raise of hands if you've seen HueForge before and used it? That's a lot of people. Sweet. If you've never seen HueForge before, HueForge is a software that was developed to turn 2D images into 3D prints. Basically, when you bring in an image, it turns it into a 3D mesh within certain parameters. We use different ways and different blending of filaments to get desired results and get different outcomes. So you can see here as Steve, the solo creator of HueForge. Can I get a round of applause for him? Being the only man that's developed this software. So on the left side, we have our mesh. This is our 3D mesh that's being created. Right now it's being created based on our image, and the tallest parts of our image you can see here are the brightest parts of our image, whereas the lowest parts of our mesh, that is the lowest parts, or the darkest parts of our image are the lowest parts of our mesh. So right now, all that we are doing is taking into account the luminance of our image to create this 3D mesh. This is standard. This is the most common way that people make HueForges. This is the most basic way that you can do it. HueForge is an artist tool. It's more for you to create artistic results. It's not necessarily a photo recreator. You can get really close results. If you had an image and you wanted to get one-to-one results, you definitely can, but that's not an expectation. We try to set that expectation when you're first starting out, that it is more of a way for you to get creative and turn an image into something for you and your results. So this is standard mode. We're blending filaments to get different shades of gray. You can see down low we're starting with that black. And as he brings in filaments from our filament library, his head's kind of blocking the way. We have a filament library. Different filaments have different TD values. Our TD values, TD stands for transmission distance. That's the opacity of all of our filaments. All filament is not the same. Some of our filaments are more opaque than others, so TD is a way for us to tell HueForge how opaque or transparent our filaments are. Now, a lower TD would be like a 1 TD, a higher TD would be like a 10 TD. So whenever you see him bring in a red and a yellow, here in the color chord, this is the center, you can see that we have some orange mixing. It's like painting. Whenever you have a red and then a yellow filament on top of it, you'll get all those orange layers in between. Somewhere with like red and blue, you'll get purple in between. So this is kind of how we get these really cool results over on the left side. We're blending filaments. We don't actually have an orange filament at all within this color core in the center. All we have is those red and yellow filaments and the blending in between. Now there are different ways that we can go about getting the results that we want out of HueForge. There's standard mode, there's color pop mode, and there's color aware as well as color match. So these are different ways that HueForge is actually looking at our images. Right now, Steve's going to set up a color pop image. And while he's doing that, do we have any questions so far? Am I losing anybody? Anybody have any questions? No? Good. Let's see what we got. All right. So we showed you how standard mode kind of worked. So color pop, the problem is if HueForge looks at this within standard mode, it's going to try to blend everything together. We won't get the black and white background of this image and the red umbrella as well as the raincoat. What it's going to do is it's going to blend everything together because it's only looking at the darkest areas and the lightest areas. So color pop was developed as a way to separate the colored areas from the black and white areas. So what it's going to do is it's going to actually be able to look at the color areas and the black and white areas, and it will stack two different HueForges together. It basically makes two 3D meshes so that you can stack them together to get the intended results. So right now he is fixing it up so that now we have that color area separate from the black and white areas. So this was a very common issue that we had in the early days of HueForge, wherever you would want just a little splash of color within a black and white image. So that's why this mode was developed. That way it could just separate and make it a lot easier. Now, you don't necessarily have to use whatever colors you see in your base image. Like I said, this is an artist tool, so we can get creative with it. He drug in a yellow filament above the red to get that orange blending area. He's going to try a blue filament so that you get a completely different result. And the greatest thing about that is 9 times out of 10, your audience is not going to see the base image, right? They're only going to see the 3D printed result. So it's not, you can get one-to-one results, but don't feel bad if you can't. Because as a beginner, it is definitely a learning curve to get those really close one-to-one image results. So do we want to, are there any questions from anybody? Go ahead.
So you said that you do this color pop mode.
Yes.
You actually have 2 separate 3D prints?
So
Repeat the question.
So repeat that question, I'm sorry.
So with the color pop mode,
With color pop mode,
you said you have 2 meshes.
you have 2 meshes that stack on top of each other, yes.
So when you print, you have 2 prints?
No, you do not have 2 prints. So what's happening is HueForge is doing all the legwork for you. So it's just able to separate the colored areas from the black and white areas, and then it's going to stack them within the program.
Here.
And you can see that here really clearly. There's a separator line right here that's bold. It's kind of hard to see for people in the back, but this is separating the 2 HueForges. So the colored area is up here, whereas all the black and white area is down low. Now, like I said, you don't have to use black and white, and you don't have to use the red. You can use whatever colors you want. It's just a way for HueForge to separate these 2 meshes, and then it stacks them together.
So you could alter them separately.
So you can alter them separately, absolutely, yeah.
Is it limited to 2?
It's only limited in color pop. It's limited to the color areas and the black and white areas. And then you can use whatever filaments you want. That's just a way for it to look at your image and to separate them so that you get whatever results you're trying to get, yeah.
Right,
Go
so
ahead.
probably most people have 3D printers and filament already,
Sure,
but probably have no idea what our TD is.
okay. How do you measure it? So the question the gentleman asked was, how do you measure TD? So TD, like I said, every filament's different. We have a filament library that's already pre-programmed with different filaments from Bamboo, Prusa, Overture, Polymaker, et cetera, the big brands. Those, even if you had a Bamboo Lab Orange, for example, let's say that it's a 5.5 in our library. That doesn't mean that your spool at home is going to be a 5.5. Not all filaments the same. It's all manufactured different. So we need to measure the TDs. The way that we measure TDs, there's 2 primary ways. There's a free way, and there's a little device called the TD1. The free way is included within HueForge. It's called the seashell test. There's a video that I did on YouTube to kind of go through how to use the seashell test. But within HueForge, there's actually a PDF that comes with this project as well. And what we're doing is we're only using 2 colors. So we have black at the bottom and then whatever color you're trying to measure. So let's just say, for example, we want to measure this blue. You see how there's no detail showing in this print on the left-hand side? This is actually what we'll print. So the PDF explains what that TD would look like. Once we print this out, you're looking for different details to come through. So you can see he's adjusting TD of this filament right now. So you can see that you get more black veins coming through and stuff like that. Within the PDF, there are different photo examples to help you compare that seashell to the PDF to give you a TD reading. That's the free way. It's a little complicated, but I have a video that goes more in depth on how to do that on YouTube. And then the TD1, that's a little device that was made so that this was way more automatic, way easier for people that have 50 plus spools of filament. Because you don't want to, these tests, as great as they are, they take 45 minutes to print each, right? So that's a lot of print time. The TD1 lets you insert a strand of filament into the little device, and it will actually output the hex code and the TD value right then and there. You can actually plug that TD1 into your computer while HueForge is open, and it'll auto-populate the color and the TD, so all you have to do is enter the filament manufacturer and the color of that filament. So there are a couple ways that you can measure TD. Yep. Are there any other questions? Anybody? Don't be shy. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to talk about color match. So there were quite a few people that have used HueForge. Are there a lot of people that understand color match, or are we confused on color match? Do you guys know what color match is? Can I get a show of hands if you've used color match at all? Okay, nobody's used, okay, well, all right. Huh?
We have time, so we'll just go ahead.
That's fine. We can go through color match a little bit. This is combo.
I know, I'm in combo.
So you want me to go through?
I'm gonna go, just a sec.
Okay, so color match. We showed standard and we showed color pop. HueForge is doing all of the legwork in both of those So it's creating the mesh for you based on what parameters are set within HueForge. So like I said, it was splitting up based on color areas and your black and white areas, where standard was just the luminance. Okay, so color match is all manual. Those first two modes were more automatic. This is all manual. We have to, as humans, we can perceive these colors the way that we want to create a 3D mesh. We're not letting HueForge do all of the work for us. But basically what we'll do is we'll take colors from this image that we see perceptually, and we'll drag them into the mesh core to create a 3D mesh. And as we create that 3D mesh, we can move around colors. So like usually what we'll do is we'll identify the background and the foreground of our images first. You can see that he drug in that white background at the bottommost part of our mesh. That'll print first. And then we'll stack this girl, this knight, on top of that. Because that's how you would think that this image would look in person, right, after it's 3D printed. So as he's doing that, he's developing the mesh, and he's going to try to get the most coherent mesh that he can. And then once we're done with that work, we go to the color core and add filaments like we did within standard and like we did within ColorPop. Color match, like I said, is a much more manual mode. Once you have a basic understanding of transmission distance, of blending filaments, of different ways to blend colors within HueForge, that's when you move into color match. Color match is a way for you to get closer to one-to-one results. You can get one-to-one results if they're more simple images, if you don't have a lot of colors, if you don't have a lot of blending within standard and ColorPop modes. But color match, let's say that you have something like this. This is a little bit more complicated. You have full control over where colors are stacked within your mesh based on what you see and what you would like. So it's just an easier way to get color separation and to do something completely custom. But like I said, it is very complicated for newcomers that are just starting out on the software, because you still need a base understanding of how HueForge works. And typically what we'll tell people when they're first starting out with their first few projects is to learn how to use grayscale. Grayscale is very simple to use. We all know that you start at black, and if you go to white, you've got gray areas in between as far as blending is concerned. It's very simple to pick up on. And then as you get comfortable with grayscale images and grayscale HueForges, the next thing that we'll tell people is to move on to fire colors. That's why we showed you the fire image in the first few previews, where you have your reds and your yellows and your oranges, because those are very simple. Most yellows are higher TDs and most reds are mid to low TDs. So it's very simple to get that orange blending in between. Now you can see that he has gotten most of this image created as a mesh. And you can turn it to the side and then zoom in a little bit. So you can see that this is how the mesh is. We haven't added any real filaments to this at all. This is just how the 3D mesh was made. Remember earlier within standard mode, the mesh was already pre-made for us based on the luminance values of the image. So with this, if you wanted to, you could drag up, can you go back up to mesh core for me? Yep. You could drag up the red from where it's at the bottom, and you could technically bring it up over top of the topmost white. And you'll see that it changed places within the 3D mesh. So we're taking the colors that we see here, and then we can make them more customized so that maybe the sash, and maybe we want that on the topmost. So that's more of the foreground, if that makes sense. Are there any questions about color match so far?
Is it possible to actually bring your background on top and print it inverted?
He asked if it's possible to invert the background, bring the background to the top of the mesh. Absolutely.
So you want to build it into a project?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can build these into a project, basically, again, with color match, full control over the mesh. So with this white background, we can actually bring all of that all the way up to the top of the mesh. And now you have a really thick HueForge. That's really beneficial, because if you have like 1 or 2 layers of the background printed, that HueForge is really flimsy and really thin. So a lot of the times we'll bring the background of that all the way up to the top. That way it's a really thick HueForge, because it'll print all of the layers at 100% all the way up to that point. So yeah, so there's definitely a way. When you're in color match, you definitely have a more manual way of doing that. And you can put colors wherever you want to in the mesh. Yep. So now that we've made our mesh core, we've made our 3D mesh, we can add filaments. This is where we get to be creative. All we were doing up to this point was just making the mesh based on what colors we saw within this image. Now when we go over to the color core, let's say that we want her to be more blue. We don't want her to be red. We can drag in and we can bring over filaments from our mesh core to the color core.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back where it was. All right. So what am I doing?
So bring all the colors over. So let's say that we don't want to use red. We want her to be blue. So we can bring in like a dark blue filament and a light blue, or however. It's okay. You can see you can get creative with it. The skin tones are a little bit messed up because of the way that we blended it within the mesh core. But in that situation, we could use a more skin tone based filament on its own instead of trying to blend colors from, what did we use, red to brown.
Yeah.
But this is where it becomes more of an artist tool. I don't know if you guys saw the HueForge booth. Did you guys see that when you were coming in? Yes, yes. I see a no. You should definitely go check that out. If you go over to the HueForge booth, there are a lot of these really cool images that, like I said in the beginning, you don't know what the base image looked like. You have no clue what the color scheme of it was. A lot of the cars and a lot of the hand-drawn stuff, completely different color scheme than what the base image is, but they still look amazing. All the stones that we have up on our wall on the backdrop, those were completely different color schemes. We just added different filament colors so that it would give you that illusion of different stones, if that makes sense. So yeah, so this is, first we start, like I said, with the mesh core, and then we go into the color core and start adding real filaments. On the right, this is our base image, and then on the left, this is what our print preview is of what it should look like if our TDs are correct. Perfect. Are there any other questions? What you got? Can you move it from color pop and then move it to what? To color match? Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you see that you aren't getting the results that you want, you can absolutely just move into color match. But there's also a way, so you can take the same image and run it through every single mode and see which one is going to work the best for you as well. So you have full control over what's going on there. So yeah, you can take it and use it in every single one of them. I saw a question over here. What you got?
Tutorials online? Or?
Do you have tutorials online? Yeah. So all of my tutorials, neokoiprints on YouTube, all of them are more for the beginners. Those are like, if you're just starting out, I've got a video on what filaments you should buy, how to get started in standard, stuff that you can follow along with better than our live presentation here today. Steve has great technical videos. His videos are great for people like me who have been doing it for 2 to 2.5 years since it's been out. And he goes over a lot of the new features and updates and stuff like that. His videos are great end to end. But yeah, there are definitely tutorials online to follow. And then there are a bunch of other creators within the community that have started doing tutorial videos as well. So if you don't like my videos, you can go watch somebody. Say that again. There's also a wiki page that we've just started that has more information on step-by-step. If you went over to the HueForge booth, you probably saw the stained glass windows. There's also stained glass all over the booth and on top of the tables. There's a step-by-step tutorial on how you can do that at home. So if that's something that you'd like to do. Oh, and there are different hotkeys that you can use within HueForge. There's a whole list of hotkeys that'll help you further. Now that we've gone into a previous version of HueForge, we had sliders because that was the old way of, that was the way that we were able to bring in filaments. You can see here he added them back to the bottom. This was the only way that we had to adjust where the colors were swapping and at what layer height. Whereas now in the newest version of HueForge 0.9, we basically got rid of these. And now all we have is this color core. And the reason the color core is more beneficial and better to use is it actually shows you what kind of blends you're getting in your images. So that's why color core replaced color sliders. One of the main hotkeys that you need to know to turn off filaments, turn them off and on, is spacebar. Whenever you're hovering over a filament, when we had sliders, you could tick them on and tick them off. Here, you have to use spacebar to turn off a certain color and turn it on. So that's one of the most useful hotkeys. But yeah, there are definitely tutorials out there for sure. Anybody else?
Just more
raised that question earlier.
Mhm.
I asked if you could turn it around.
Mm-hmm.
So I want, these are meshes coming upward off that plate to produce what you look at.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to ask if you could turn that around to where your image
It's flat on the plate.
flat on the plate, or you can build it into the object you create.
So you're asking if you can turn over a HueForge onto the build plate so it's flat? Is that essentially what you're asking?
Flat front picture on. Say I wanted to build a knife box for a wedding party that
Sure.
wanted their picture on the knife case.
Mm-hmm. So no, as of right now, there is no way to make a HueForge completely flat. You can't flip it over onto the bed. It's all raised images. That's just the way it's, because if we had it to where you could have it flat, that would mean that it would have to have an MMU or an AMS. Right now, it's all swap by layer. So because of that nature, you can't flip it over on top. Now in the future, that might be coming.
It is technically possible. I know how to do it technically, but it would be a plugin. Because I do want to keep HueForge, the core tenet of HueForge is that anyone can use it, and that it's all layer swap by layer so that any printer can do it, and to minimize waste. So, but if you do have an MMU, which is a lot of people, and you did want that flat surface print, there'd be a plugin that would be separate from the base unit that would be, or base HueForge that would allow you to do that. But people keep asking me to do more features in the base HueForge, and I keep adding them, and I haven't gotten around. And honestly, manipulating mesh geometry is a giant pain. So because STLs have to be watertight, and watertight meshes are fun. And to be honest, the number, so one of the things that has to happen before I can do that is I need to, right now, if you have a transparent image, so HueForge respects image transparency for like a PNG. JPEGs don't do transparency, so if you cut out a background and save it as a JPEG, it's not transparent anymore. But HueForge will respect that transparency. But the way it does it is it just makes all that transparent area 0 height. So it's still there, it just slices away in the slicer. But I need to get that cut out before I can even support that option. So I need to actually, but adding mesh, watertight mesh to the back of an arbitrary shape is not trivial. So, and then it will end up being a lot more triangles when you're done. And HueForge meshes are already high triangles. So it's kind of a trade-off, but yeah, I see the use case. It's just not there yet.
Okay, fair enough.
That's a good question. Yeah, another question?
I came in late, but does it support MMU? I mean, does it support it now, or you would have to have a plug-in?
So so HueForge itself does not, okay, the question is, does it support MMU? HueForge itself doesn't care what your slicer or printer is. So if you have an MMU in your slicer, you say change filament, that's all you need to do is change filament at layer height. It doesn't support multiple swaps per layer though. HueForge will never make a mesh right now that requires multiple swaps per layer. So it supports MMU in that you can, the improves the slicer, you can say change filament and it'll work just like it would any other way. It'll do a tool changer, AMS, MMU, manual swaps. All of those are fine, but that's all a slicer operation, and HueForge doesn't care. But it will not support multiple colors per layer at the moment. And again, that may happen as a different add-on, but for right now, that's not in the software.
That's fair. And then my second question was, do you, a lot of companies will sell you the CMYKs.
Right.
Can you get good images out of the CMYKs?
So the question is, can you get good images out of CMYK? And the answer is not by themselves. Because it's all swap by layer, you can't, any one layer is one color. So to make CMYK work, you have to selectively not use a color in certain places and use a different color instead. And so because of that, it won't work. The color model would work. The blending, you can use any of those CMYK filaments to make an image, but you can't just recreate all the colors that way. Again,
like a
because
laser jet printer or something like that, or an ink printer, it's not the same way in what you're thinking.
It is the same color blending. It has to be done in CMYK color space, but it just won't, because of the layer swap limitation that's in the software, it will not work right now. Again, potentially possible in the future, but is not in the software now. So, it's a good question. More questions?
Go ahead.
Yes, okay, do I support any vector-based image formats? Simple SVG formats do work. If they have lots of cutouts and stuff in them, it doesn't tend to render correctly. And what HueForge is doing internally is just turning it into a 4096 raster image. I do want to get, that would be something that would be part of the base software, but I do want to get actual loops and lines so you can scale and everything and make it easier to just say this loop is at this height kind of thing. But that's another project for down the road. But it will take a basic SVG image and turn it into a usable HueForge image. Some users have had problems where the text, when the text converts better in a better image program to less anti-aliasing, because HueForge and color match with anti-aliasing can cause spikes in artifacts. So it doesn't always import the best. You may do better still importing it into a Photoshop or something and converting it first. So, good question. Any more questions before I do a little bit? I just want to talk briefly about what I did here in the middle. So one of the things about color match is that HueForge can only really match one color once. That is something I plan on addressing in not the next point release, but the one after that, where you can force colors to be matched only within certain layer ranges, or the same color can be matched in different places at different ranges. But right now, if I were to flip, I'm going to go back to the mesh core. If I were to flip this over, which you can do by highlighting and then invert, and I have a black at the bottom and a black in the middle, you see that I have all these kind of edges that all of a sudden showed up here. This is a bit more of an advanced topic, but you see I have all these, like the black edges here, and what you're seeing here is the side of the mesh. It's a physical bit of the, people say, how do I get rid of this green or this white surrounding? This is actually literally the side color of the mesh because of all the layers that are stacked below it. The issue here is that this black down here at the bottom, hold on, is not matching the same as this black. Let me grab this black and bring it down so you can see the opposite side. So there, and I just flipped it. Now the black is matching at the bottom, but not matching in the middle. And so this is one of the limitations and one of the things you have to kind of overcome as the artist. And what I do here is I do what I call sharing the black. If I reverse this in color match, let me put my gray. Oh, I killed my gray. That's what happened. Put my gray back in. Yeah. So if I reverse this in color match, down here, there, then I'm using the same black here to be the base color of the red and get me to the dark red, as well as being the black that's at the top of the dark gray. And so I stop having those nasty edges in the middle of my, let me get the darker gray here. I don't have the bad edges in the middle of the mesh that I had before. So I call this sharing colors. Sharing black and sharing white are the two most common colors you're going to share. Now the newest version of HueForge has made big steps in making sure this prediction down here is correct. It turns out that blending on top of black filament is different than blending on top of white filament. And effectively your TD, the transparency of your filament, now is higher for most filaments. For darker colors on top of lighter colors, your TD is higher. And so HueForge in 090, the newest version, which is out for everybody, if you own HueForge and you haven't gotten it, I couldn't send out emails to everybody because I changed downloaders, but you can go to the front page of the website. There's full instructions for how to get your copy. Everyone has it. Everyone gets the update. This has been improved drastically in this version to give much, much better results and more accurate results. There's prints all over the table that I used as tests that came out exactly as predicted by HueForge. And this allows you to share that black in the middle so you don't get any of those edges. And then if you think about just smoothly transitioning from light to dark through the mesh, you'll get a much more smooth and continuous blend that'll be much more appealing when you get the final image. Questions? All right. No more questions. What are you going to talk about, Danny? Is there something you want to see done in HueForge?
I like your Eiffel Tower.
Eiffel Tower, okay.
Example with the transparency
Yes.
behind it. Something
Right.
like that would be wonderful.
So this one actually is like that. If I go to backlit, you'll see that all the red areas are dark because they've got the black in the way. And you can see as I add more black, they get darker. Right? And all this, the armor is going to be is going to be like a lithophane because it starts with the white. Anytime you start with the white at the bottom, you're going to have that effect. Let me see if I have one of those on here. This one is also done that way. Whereas if you go to backlit, you're going to see the same kind of thing. But again, these are just white, so they're maybe not exactly what you want. But it really is just a matter of if you have higher TD and lighter colors on the background, they're going to let light through. And you can always see it by just hitting backlit here. So that often is just a consequence of doing what I said, of sharing the black. If you're blending up to the black, that background is always going to be, almost always going to be transparent to some extent. And so you can, sometimes you actually pick the background color, not because, I often pick my colors and my order based on the back to front order of colors in the image, which isn't always perfect. There's going to be a mixture, but I'll often pick it that way. But sometimes I'll pick it specifically for the backlit possibility, to how it's going to look when you light it up. One important thing to note is when you're trying to pick, for color match especially, where you want to put your colors. I just recently figured out that, hold on. Here. It's set here. I just recently figured out that people were literally starting at the bottom edge of the image and going up and adding colors as they were introduced into the image. But that's the wrong way to think about it. You want this, because, and it makes sense, this is right next to the image and it goes up vertically, so it seems like they should line up. But this is a representation of the image turned on its side, like this. If you come in here, you'll see all those colors are in here. Well, this one doesn't have red because the red's over here. But those colors all stack up that way. So just make sure you're thinking about it in the right orientation, and it becomes a little bit easier to pick how the colors line up. But you can't always make them work perfectly. Because like here, we've got the blue of the suit and the blue of the sky, and they're in different planes. But you kind of just work on how that lines up nicely. Any other questions? Okay, I got one here and then one there, so we'll start here.
How do shiny, like silk filaments and other metallic type things affect HueForge?
Okay, how do silk and shiny type filaments affect HueForge? This is a really good question. So first of all, silk filaments tend to be lower TD. So they are less transmissive, though I will say that a fair number of them are in the a TD of 2 range, which is like an entirely usable TD range, especially when you're doing more colors or smaller, thinner HueForges. Up until now, up until this release, HueForge didn't take any of that shininess into account when doing anything. But now, actually, if I were to put, let's just grab this red here. I'm going to copy these all over just because I don't know exactly how this is going to work. Let's undo this real quick. Get the blend better. I'm going to copy these all over. I'm going to bring this here. So it's red on top. And then, I can use the Polymaker Christmas red. No, I'll just do this here. Sorry. You can right click on a filament, edit it, and you can add tags. And you can add the silk tag. If it's in the name, it'll already act like it. You can save and close. And then if I go to render lit, which is a method that will show it lit as if it has a light on it, it will actually show that silk effect. This one does not seem to be doing it, but it does. Oh, I'm on mesh core, that's why. There we go. There we go. Still not, where's that? I tagged it, right? Live demos. But silks and stuff will be predicted appropriately. So they can show there. You can get some blending there. That's kind of experimental. It does work. It's pretty good. But it won't generally affect the blending, except that the silk agents often make it a little bit more opaque. Certain ones, like silver, those are brick walls. But like gold and red and things like that tend to be 1 to 2 to 3 TD in some cases. The starlights, the polysonic starlights, tend to be in the 2 to 3 range. So they're totally usable as blendable filaments. Over there?
You start with white and then you go back to white, is that right?
If you're blending, so it depends on what your goal is. In a standard mode, you're just going to go from black to white. even in one of these color matches, you might go black-white to color because that just makes more sense in terms of how the image is built. But you might also go black-white, white to dark to black, back up to a light, back up to a dark. You could do multiple ranges of that in your print.
Just because this has a blue gradient, that's why you're going back.
Yeah, that's why I'm going back to white to get that blue gradient there. Yep, exactly.
Start with white, it's generally a more luminous.
If you start with white in the background here, it's going to be able to be backlit. It will give you the kind of lithophane effect on the backlighting if you start with white. And that can be an intentional choice that you make. I'm going to start with white because I want that, or yellow because I want that. Those are going to be, it's any high TD filament is going to work, but white and yellow and those colors tend to be higher TD. If you were to start, if you had a white that was like the Polylight cold white is like a 1. That's going to give you a few layers, but you wouldn't be able to go that far with it before it, well, actually, you can go 1 millimeter basically before it's going to be opaque. So you'd be able to get blending up to about 1 millimeter. TD number is the backlit value. Good questions here. We have about 10 more minutes, or 8 more minutes, I think. Any more questions? All right, Orange.
So you mentioned start with grayscale and then try to higher colors. If you were building a library of let's say max 10 filaments that you have on hand to use HueForge,
I'm gonna let Danny answer that question.
So
restate his question.
basically what he's asking is what kind of filaments you should start out with if you're on a budget, right? I mean, if you have 10 spools of filament that you want to use for HueForge to get started. First of all, there's a tip, get sample packs. Sample packs are super cheap. You don't use a lot of filament, you use a lot of filament colors and a lot of different TDs. So sample packs are like the really cheap way to get into it, and you can always re-spool that onto a full size if you're using like an AMS or something along those lines. But really you need every color and every transmission distance ever. Ever. Hey, I work with a lot of filament companies. No, I'm just kidding.
And you need to buy it from Overture, and you need to buy it from Newmaker.
I have an affiliate link for all of these companies. No, I'm just kidding. So basically you want a really good black. All blacks are the same, basically. They're all low TD for the most part. Grays, we have specific chrominal gray, which is chrominal is the HueForge specific brand that is on HueForge's website. It's a little bit pricey, but it's made specifically with HueForge in mind. Certain TDs you can't get reliably from other companies, whereas chrominal you can. But you'll want a good dark gray, like a higher TD. You'll want a good low, like light gray. And then you'll want 2 whites. You'll want a high TD white and a low TD white. The easiest way to look at it is, like you said, silks. Those are typically lower TDs. 1 to 4 TD is lower. Matte filament is also pretty low. Anything that's like a sonic filament or a hyper filament or any high-speed PLA, that's typically higher TD. Not always the case, but most of the time. It's just the type of formula that they use for those. So there's, with grayscale, I would typically recommend grayscale, and then you're going to know what colors you need for your projects. But to start out, typically, like I said, we start with grayscale. You want black, white, high TD white, low TD white, dark gray, light gray. And that'll get you like most of the way. An honorable mention is Bamboo has a blue gray. And that blue gray really helps with blending.
It's a much cheaper option than the chrominal gray.
Yeah,
I would start with that.
Cheaper option,
honestly. Sure. I sell chrominal. You should get the Bamboo blue gray.
Yeah.
And then when you know you need it, you should get the chrominal gray.
Yeah.
There's 2 chrominal grays. Actually, we're out of shadow gray. There's
the
only
8
the 8 TD penumbra gray now.
Okay.
And then I would say a red, a blue, a yellow, and then a green maybe a green. And you're trying to aim for medium TD here, 4-ish, 3, 4, 5 for most
It's hard
days.
to know when you're first starting out buying filament what TDs you're going to have, because TD directly correlates to how many layers, how many millimeters are printed before light stops passing through it. So 1 TD, you only have to print 1 millimeter of filament before light stops passing through it, where at 10, you have to print 10 millimeters before light stops passing through it. So,
but to clarify briefly, that's backlit. Frontlit, a 1 TD is going to give you at 0.04 layer height is going to give you 3 layers. of unique colors, and then it'll be saturated. So you just need to be aware that there's a flip that does, it's not exactly the
It
same.
makes things complicated. That's why I do beginner tutorials.
I don't want
for
them
you.
to think they can get a 1 TD and print 10 layers of filament, and they're like, why did it stop
No.
after 3 layers?
Just kidding. Did you have a question? Okay. So again, sample packs. Sample packs like the 4 250 gram rolls, that's the cheapest way to get into HueForge and to get a decent sized library started, because it does get very expensive if you just go out and start buying every filament under the sun. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Cool.
In the black shirt here?
Yeah, are you guys selling the TD1 or is anybody selling the TD1
Okay.
at the show?
Is the TD1 being sold at the show today? No. Big Tree Tech and Ajax 3D have been working together. Big Tree Tech just announced the pre-sale today. You can go pre-order it now. It should ship before the end of June, I think, or by the end of June is their last date.
Yeah, that's what
And then we shouldn't have problems with shortages of TD1s after that. But the initial build volume is going to be based on the pre-sale. But they've got it all worked out. They've hammered it out. They've got the tooling and everything. They just need to start assembling them en masse. It's been a longer time coming than any of us wanted. Just so anyone knows, that's an entirely separate venture from HueForge, but obviously it's tied tightly with HueForge. So, and if you already have one, the next point release of HueForge will release the new firmware for the TD1s as well, which is significantly better color accuracy. It's still not perfect, but it is way better. Your grays won't be green anymore for the TD1, so you can get much better color codes out of it than you did before. The TDs were always good. The color codes now are getting better.
Yeah, color was an afterthought when the TD1 was being developed. It was just like this could be cool. Like that was kind of how it was looked at, but now it's definitely become a important part of TD1.
And if you already have a TD1 and you're worried that this TD1S thing, do I need to buy that now? You do not. It is the same it is a parity piece of hardware. And the goal was to get a manufactured parity piece of hardware first before they worked on any kind of updates and upgrades and things like that. So if you already have one, you don't need a new one. The only place I know of right now that you might be able to get a kit that you have to solder together is on West 3D's website. And they only had like 35 or 40 of them last time I looked.
Yeah, they're running
So,
really low. So luckily they did the pre-launch today. So yep.
That's a good question. All right, we have like 3 more minutes, so pick a dance.
So with the new version of HueForge,
Oh yeah.
somebody asked about silk filaments. Starlight filaments will also render in HueForge now, but now we can use glow-in-the-dark filaments.
Yeah.
So if he brings in a glow-in-the-dark filament, it will actually render. You could use it before, it's just it wouldn't render within HueForge, but now you can actually see what that result's going to look like. Typically with glow-in-the-dark filaments, if you use like a glow green, when you get it, it's like a white milky color. Those are usually high TD filaments in general, so just keep that in mind whenever you're ordering glow-in-the-dark filaments. Really good for like Halloween time and stuff like that. But he's going to drag one in so that we can show you guys a little bit about. There you go. So now you can see what kind of effect you would get if you had a glow-in-the-dark green filament within your HueForges. So that's another cool thing that we can do within the program.
Yeah, you do have okay. The TD1, the new firmware will do a glow check. It's pretty experimental. You may have to adjust it. It's mostly just it don't do the color. It will just be about the intensity. But you set the color here to whatever the glow color is for that filament, and then you set the effect strength, which is it's not TD. It's the general like strength, and basically I just do a cameo print with glow on the dark on the top, hit it hard with a UV light, and then go look at it and kind of compare them. And then you can also do fluorescence color shift, which is the starlight. In that case, you would have to give it the color, and then the strength matters a little bit, but it's not as important in that one. It's mostly just the color of the shift that it cares about. And it looks like on Mac OS it doesn't quite properly update this dialog box, so that's good to know. But yeah, glow, and these are all consider these experimental. I'm not guaranteeing they're totally accurate. I will say you can only really do one effect per print. You could do multiple glows. If you had like 4 or 5 glow colors, you could do that. You could do multiple fluorescent colors, but if you try to mix glow and fluorescent, it's gonna overwrite each other. They're not gonna work. The one thing, if you do fluorescent, you come here and you set the LED color to UV light in the backlit mode. And then these aren't actually fluorescent, it's just changed the color of the light. But then it would, if they were fluorescent effects, they would pop up here. All right, well, thank you very much for coming out. If you haven't visited the HueForge booth, please come by. If you have, come by again. At the end of the show tomorrow, if you're here, you're welcome to peel off any stones off the wall that you want and take them home with you, because otherwise it's getting torn down and thrown out. So, all right.